nie, ons is live. Hello Leon, thanks again for coming to join us on the podcast.
Thanks, Dewald. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, so why did we phone, or why did we contact you, Leon? And it's like I said in our messages, we've got this podcast and we speak to a lot of different people and we get around to a lot of different places, and everybody is saying Africa, Africa, Africa. So I found you run a company called Why Africa, and I've had a look, and it looks quite interesting. So I think introduce yourself, tell us who you are and why Africa is, and where did it come from?
Okay, I worked in different parts of Africa for almost now probably more than 20 years, 22 years in different sectors. I started off in the tourism sector when I was very young and worked in Botswana and Zambia, Zimbabwe, up into Mozambique. And then thereafter, I became a journalist, actually, and I specialized in the mining sector. So I was a mining journalist for more than 13 years, also venturing into Africa, so covering new projects, exploration projects in the DRC, in Nigeria, and and also different other sectors as well, sustainability, for instance, infrastructure, and all these sort of different sectors. And the question that I always got asked is, if I tell people about what I'm doing and where I'm going, is why Africa? And I thought it was quite a good name, because you can play on the name. It can go both ways. If things go bad in Africa, you can ask why the hell would you want to invest in Africa? Or you can sort of tell people, well, why Africa? It's good in Africa. You should actually go and invest there. And this is what I found throughout my years in Africa, is that it's different to what people really perceive and what the media in the world actually make Africa out to be. And that this is why Africa came from. I started initially. I was also looking at a media company and publications. So I still do magazines, but my main product at the moment, or what I do, is the road trip. So I have sponsors that provide me with vehicles and money, of course, to do it. And then I go traveling into different parts of Africa to promote Africa, not only Africa, but also the projects in Africa in different sectors, including agriculture is quite a big focus, mining, energy, infrastructure, water management. And then, yes, and trying to convince investors, who's probably my major followers, from Canada, London, America, to come and invest in certain projects in Africa.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you do these trips and then you go and find projects that could be interesting and you pitch these to the investors.
Sort of. I do that through my social media platforms and through my magazines. I wouldn't go and do a roadshow to pitch a specific project at an investor, like an investment roadshow, but I do it indirectly through my my publications and my online presence. On LinkedIn, I've got quite a lot of followers, and then the others, I do short videos, but and I've got a YouTube channel, but that is not my major focus. So I wouldn't sort of, what I assume what you guys do is do corporate videos for companies or stuff like that. That's not the space that I play in. So I try and expose or give those companies exposure, but at the same time trying to connect them with suppliers and service providers that wants to expand their footprint into Africa. And then in that sort of way, I can also link up with companies. It's evolving to become more of a consultancy sort of company, where I want to help companies doing business in Africa to expand in those sort of in those regions where people are very unsure about. So, for instance, this year I went to the Moxico province in Angola, which has not been it's, not many people know about it, but there are opportunities. So try and go and look at the on-ground conditions, how to operate, what to expect when you go there, and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
So everything you've been saying now adds up to what I mentioned earlier. Is when I went to Google why Africa, and I put that into the Google search bar, the first prompt that came up is, why is Africa poor? And that talks about a narrative and a specific point of departure, which has been the narrative in the media about Africa for a very long time. And for yourself as a journalist who's worked, you've actually been on the ground, and you go on the ground to see what's happening. I would imagine that you are able to, because of your first-hand knowledge, and you are not. Let's put it this way: if you stand back and you don't know, you often follow the existing and prevailing prejudice. But if you have been on the ground and you've been able to come back and tell things firsthand, I'm sure that in a lot of cases you are debunking that reigning narrative that particularly the West has about Africa and opportunities in Africa.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. I think if you for me, it's always the way you define or who defines the poverty of Africa. And if you look at economic indicators, for instance, and it's sure it doesn't look great. I mean, the GDP is not great. That's undeveloped. But there's always been, wherever you go, there's a economy in Africa. People are doing things, which is not normally. I mean, if you go to the Moxico province of Angola, where there's rivers, there's a big river economy. For instance, if you speak to guys who's worked on the ground in Africa, they will tell you that most of the stuff move across borders and move across rivers, and nobody knows about it. There's no economists in those countries who actually know what's going on. So internally and between different African countries, there's almost some trade going on. Nobody keeps a record of any of the products that move in and out. So in that, I mean, economically wise, there's always activity in Africa. And I'm not saying Africa, look, there's places in Africa that is really poor, that people do struggle. I mean, they cut off from in terms of infrastructure from major ports or so. And if they don't have what has happened recently with drought, with extended droughts and very extreme weather events, these communities struggle to actually plant stuff, because that's what they rely on and trade with, and also for self-sufficient agriculture and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not refuting the fact that Africa is poor, but I do think it's not as bad as what is often portrayed in the media, in the mainstream media.
Yeah, that's kind of where I thought you would go with that, because we live in South Africa, and even we don't really know what's going on in the rest of Africa. So tell us a little bit about what really inspired you to start Why Africa, and how has your first motivation to do that, how's that played out with how it's developed?
I think I just always thought when doing these trips and traveling in Africa, that there is so many opportunities for people to get involved in Africa. And there's so many entrepreneurs in Africa, they just don't have the exposure. Nobody talks about what's going on. And I'm not talking, I mean, BBC, these sort of companies do actually focus on Africa, but they don't do very remote parts of Africa. So there's and especially these days with ESG investments, with the environmental interest, with offset for big companies who wants to invest in, for instance, conservation or community farming projects. There's really big opportunities for these guys, and I just thought that they need exposure, and these guys need to be linked with each other. So that's what drove me. I still think there's a lot of opportunity in Africa, and these people don't often speak to each other because nobody knows about it. So if you go to the Moxico province, for instance, in Angola, where since the end of the Civil War, infrastructure has been destroyed, and it's really hard to get in there, to get out. But there's for instance, big agricultural projects that's been driven by local guys. But all they need really to flourish is funders or people who would see what they're doing or know what they're doing and take it from there. So that's probably, I would say, what I thought would drive me in terms of how it's doing. There's interest these days. There's a lot of people who does ask me about, and especially South African people, and that wasn't originally my main aim. Wasn't to actually focus on South African guys. I wanted to do it as an African focused, say for instance, a Ghanaian geologist who wants to do work in Mozambique or whatever, trying to link and inform those sort of people. But there's a lot of South Africans who's interested in looking north of the Limpopo, and with South Africa, and I think I've written an article about it. With South Africa, we do feel in South Africa there's the options are a little bit limited. We are struggling. And I always say, well, we've got a whole continent north of us, which is full of opportunity. You don't have to be stuck in South Africa complaining about stuff in South Africa if you have countries who's going to welcome you up north, and they do. Zambia, for instance, is very welcoming to people who wants to contribute to the economy.
So I think what a lot of South Africans what the perception that a lot of South Africans have is that Africa is a dangerous place. It's because we live in South Africa, which is, to be honest, is dangerous. Tell us about that. What is is Africa dangerous? Is it safe? Is it?
Well, I'm sitting here, and we're sitting here, and we live in almost. I don't know what Joburg and Cape Town is on the list of the most dangerous cities in the world. I mean, we are living in one of the most dangerous countries, not only in Africa, in the world. I mean, Africa is. I feel 100% more safe in places in Africa than in South Africa. To be honest, in Malawi, you never. There's not a lot of crime. There's not a lot of murders. For instance, Malawi is one. Zambia is another one. We came back from Angola. We slept next to the road in Angola. Botswana, as people know, Botswana. I think a lot of South Africans know Botswana. It's safe. There's crime. There's petty crime, but I don't think it's as violent as in South Africa. Nigeria is a different ballgame. The DRC obviously has got its elements of danger. But yeah, I mean, I think today, no matter where you go in the world, there's going to be this element of danger.
Yes, well, that's true. But I visited Zimbabwe last year for the first time, and it was like, before I went, it's like, oh shit, what I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And when I got there, it was definitely not what I expected. The people were friendly. We never locked the lodge where we stayed. We never locked the doors. The farmer said that he leaves his doors open. He says he leaves his bar door open specifically because hopefully by the time they get through the house, they've had a couple of toots and then they don't.
No, that's a good strategy. Yeah, but that's true, Dewald. I mean, that is exactly what I'm saying. I mean, I've always, since I can remember that I've gone into Africa, people say, "Oh, but what are you doing? Are you crazy? Is it safe?" And I travel alone sometimes. I would travel through places alone. My wife is actually, she's traveled Africa more than what I did. She's traveled with public transport from Ghana to Timbuktu in Mali, for instance, and stuff like that. And I mean, this is the things people don't realize, that you can actually do this. They do perceive Africa as a dangerous place.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question, and that is, how long have you been doing Why Africa? How long has it been running for?
I think I started Why Africa, if I can remember, just before COVID. Well, just when COVID hit. So when was that? 2020?
2020.
Yes.
2020.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very young. It's still, very young. I don't know where it's going to take me because I started because I was in media and I was a journalist, and as we all know with COVID, the journalists and the media industry struggled. So,
Indeed.
and I always had this. I actually did think about it for a very long time, and I did mold it, and I sort of tried to build a business model for a very long time. And COVID was just the trigger for me to just say, okay, that's it. I'm going to do it, and yeah. So.
Well,
Sure.
it's always good. It's always good when someone has an impulse to do something and a wish and an urge to do it, and then you do it and you build it. And I mean, looking at the number of followers you have, it looks like definitely you're getting the attention as to whether you are getting the financial throughput that you would like. We hope that is building and going well for you. But I have a question, and that is, you've traveled Africa quite considerably, and we all know, as we discussed now, that the perception of Africa out there versus the reality on the ground is sometimes quite different. Is there anywhere in particular that really surprised you that you went to, that what the vision of it out there and what you actually saw on the ground was very different? Is there anywhere in particular you could
Yeah.
think of? Yeah.
I think probably not a division that I did expect. I would tell you stuff. I would say that because in some of these places I've been, say, 10 years ago, and there's always, I'm gonna venture off a little bit from your guess. It's
Go
not
for it.
directly answering it, but just something that I often speak about, that I thought about, is places that I know that I've been to 10 or 12 years ago, 15 years maybe, and then go and revisiting them today. Places in Zambia, for instance, Lusaka, it comes to mind. A town like Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe comes to mind. Livingston in Zambia, Malawi, Lilongwe in Malawi, all these different towns in Zimbabwe, for instance, and in Namibia especially is the other one. Swakopmund. If I think back about 10, 12 years ago, when I went there, and what I can remember of what it was and what it is today, then there has been a hell of a development. It is crazy, actually. But when I went to Vic Falls 10 years ago, 12 years ago, there wasn't diesel. You couldn't find any food in the shops, and there weren't any restaurants. So you had to stock up in Botswana, for instance, before you went to Zimbabwe to so that you have everything that you need. Today, it's not there. If you go to Vic Falls, although people say you hear Zimbabwe is struggling, like you hear there are shortages. Yeah, sure there is, but it's a hell of a lot better than what it was. So, and the same in Zambia. Lusaka, I couldn't believe when I went to Lusaka this year and compare it to what I knew Lusaka as a decade ago. It is crazy how much development there is happening in Africa. I'm not even talking about East Africa. In places in East Africa, Dar es Salaam, and places in Kenya, it's changed so much. It's really developed. Although we hear every day that Africa is still not as developed as what it should be, and that's probably true. But that's the point. There's places that you expect to be bad, and they just blow your mind. You think, oh well, Rwanda is another place. I mean, Kigali in Rwanda is, and you will hear many people who go there, they would say how wonderful Kigali is. 15 years ago, it wasn't like that.
Yes, interesting. I have been to Lusaka, and I was astounded. This is about 2018. The malls and the development, and I would imagine this is now 5 years on. you could see the cranes on the skyline told the story. So things are obviously developing. And as you say, Rwanda, one sees incredible photographs of what Rwanda is looking like. So Africa might not be developed, but it is rapidly developing.
But
Exactly.
in that lies the opportunity for people to actually make money in Africa. To
Yeah, that's exactly
because
the
the stuff must be developed still.
Yes. So, I think where I see opportunities are where there's problems. I mean, the more problems, the more opportunities. In Angola has in the main cities is Luanda, which I haven't been to, by the way, but I would assume Luanda is pretty developed. But if you look at these provinces, for where I have been in Lunda Sul and Mexico province, being that it used to be sort of, and it still is sort of opposition country. The government didn't spend a lot of money there. Well, they didn't spend a lot of money anyway because they took a lot of the oil and stuff and then money. But anyway, these are the places where there's opportunities and people are already looking at those places. The railroad from Zambia and the Benguela railroad from Zambia and the DRC to Lobito port in Angola is a huge investment by the EU and America, and China is trying to get in there. So that is going to be a hub of activity, in 5 years. It's going to be something I don't, yeah, it will be hard to imagine that it looked like it did today in 5 years' time. I think, I did.
So on that topic of infrastructure, so if let's say an agricultural or mining company or anybody wants to invest in Africa, how easy is it to get your product to port? And or what would be the closest port, for instance? Like if you say there's huge developments in agriculture up in Angola,
yeah,
would they sell the products in the country, or is there a possibility for export?
Well, there is a possibility for export. I do at the moment. There's places where the infrastructure is still a little bit iffy, but that is changing quickly. I mean, the Lobito corridor in Angola will and from Zambia to the DRC and even parts of northern Namibia would be able to use Angola, the ports in Angola. There's 2 or 3 ports that they are busy working on. Lobito is one of them that they're enlarging. So a lot of the copper, for instance, from Zambia will now be transported via the Lobito corridor, Benguela railway to Angola. The Kazankula bridge over Botswana has made a huge difference. Although there's not a railway now, I think yesterday I saw that that project where they're going to rebuild some of the railway lines to go on the Trans-Kalahari up through into Zambia. There's a lot of work being done on that. On the Kazankula bridge, there's already a rail line on the bridge, so they just got to connect it up. So then the rail will extend from Zimbabwe into Botswana, into Zambia, and up further north. And then obviously the copper mines at the moment in Zambia is making use of Dar es Salaam or South Africa, but then it is struck still to Durban. But there's huge developments in terms of railroads and ports in the rest of Africa. And in fact, I mean, a lot of them, including Walvis Bay in Namibia, Walvis Bay and the Trans-Kalahari Railroad corridor is huge. So South Africa, if they don't wake up soon, like they're going to lose a lot of business in terms of port exports, because the Mozambique ports are good. East Africa's, Tanzania's, Namibia, Angola. So yeah, there's a lot of developments which will change logistics and infrastructure, I think, in Southern Africa at least.
Well, it's also interesting that the ports you mentioned in our neighboring countries, Mozambique and Angola and Namibia, as most of the agricultural products, particularly fresh produce that's being exported from Southern Africa, is being exported to markets in the Northern Hemisphere. So those ports are in fact closer to the Northern Hemisphere than Cape Town, Port Elizabeth and Durban. And so, as you say, if the South Africa doesn't wake up, Southern Africa is going to be shipping all of the stuff out of our neighboring ports. And we've watched with interest what's happening in Mozambique with a lot of the South African citrus going out of there. So and Zimbabwean, that's correct. So it's a very interesting take on that. And particularly because of our agricultural background or our agricultural focus, is there anything in particular that you could add about agricultural developments in the places that you've seen?
I've seen. It's interesting. I just went over the trip that I've done. So things that I've noted is a lot of blueberries in Namibia. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, on the Kavango River. There's quite a lot of. There's now a new development close to the Vundu, and that's another place. One of those places that when I went there after 4 years, I thought, wow, this place used to be a village, and now there's development. There's a blueberry development there. There's other agricultural projects in that area between Rundu and the Vundu. The blueberry seems to be the main thing. Western Zambia, I saw a lot of nuts, and there's actually a government project looking at it. Sugar cane in Zambia, I don't know if you guys know about it, in the Mazubuku area.
No, we don't know about it. So anything you can tell us, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think actually, I don't know if Illovo Sugar is still involved there, but they used to have a big sugarcane development just south of Lusaka, between Lusaka and Livingston.
Okay.
That's a big project. I'm just trying to think about the nuts. The nuts in Western Zambia was huge. It was a huge land that was being developed for these.
What kind of nuts?
Is it cashew nuts?
Okay.
Cashew nuts, yeah. I'll just make sure on the report that I've done.
Okay. Nuts. Anyway, nuts.
Probably.
I think it was or macadamia or cashew nuts. One of those.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the map here at Namibia. That Rundu is right up north on the Angola border.
Yeah.
Just before you go into the Caprivi Strip.
Yes.
It's far from the Caprivi Strip still, but yeah, it is as far north as most South Africans has probably been.
Yeah.
So those blueberries would be they're probably being produced for export from Namibia.
Yeah.
How do they exit the country? How do they exit Namibia?
Yeah, they go through Walvis Bay. So they truck them through to Walvis Bay. So it's about it's quite a distance that they've got to go, but they can get them there in one day. So they truck them to Walvis. There's a blueberry project close to Rundu actually. And then there's this new one, which is a South African company, Namibia Berries, I think, with 2 Spanish investors in the Vundu on the Kavango River. It's right on the Kavango River where the South African Recce unit, what was it called? 32 Battalion used to have a camp right there on the Kavango River. It's right opposite them, that old camp. The old Recce camp where they are developing this blueberry project.
My goodness. Wow. So there is a lot of development in Southern Africa. And you were saying, so nuts in Zambia. Anything else fresh produce that's being exported that you saw?
I didn't see this person, but I know about it. There's citrus in Botswana, in a weird place. That is right in, I think, in Selebe Peakway that I know of, which quite intrigued me because it's a known mining area. So, but I think the mine has got some involvement in starting the citrus project. So it's becoming quite big. So Botswana is exporting citrus, oranges and stuff, which is interesting.
Yeah. I'm looking at Google Maps here. It's about 800. It's about, call it 900 kilometers from Rundu to Walvis Bay. So it can be done in a day with a truck, depending on what the road conditions are like and how many kudu they get crossing the road at night. But Celebi Pique, if you look at it's almost in line with Bytebridge
Yeah,
on
Yeah.
the map. So it
Yeah.
could be Bytebridge has got huge citrus developments. So well, the climate would probably be very similar.
Similar. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I actually spoke to a guy who was involved in that project, and they've done a lot of research there on the swell and things like that. So yeah, they're very excited about that project. And I'm sure you know about Panda Matenga in Botswana.
No?
No, tell us more.
There's actually a lot of South African farmers there in Panda Matenga. I came through there now, and there's huge developments there. They're building big silos. I think they've built 14 or 16 new silos in Panda Matenga.
Where is that approximately?
Okay, it's close to Kasane in Botswana, just south of Kasane. As you go up to Livingstone in Zambia, just on the southern side of the Zambezi River.
Okay.
Panda is actually a very interesting project. I mean, you can go and do some research on it. It's very interesting, but it looks like they're extending it now because they're building more silos. So I think there's quite a big developments going on in Panda.
Yeah, and there's massive big wheat farming developments in and vegetable farmings in Zambia as well. That's under irrigation, under pivots and things, which I would love to see one day. That one place has got 1,600 hectares on the pivot, which could be incredible to see.
Yeah, there's huge, and look, I don't even know what they do there, but in the Choma area in Zambia, and there's lots of South African farmers there, and in Mazabuku, there's huge land being cultivated in those areas. Malawi is another place that we also went to. Malawi is tobacco. There's tobacco is huge in Malawi. So lots of opportunities there in that sort of those spaces, where people don't really know. Zimbabwe's still got a big tobacco industry, although not as big as it used to be. But yeah, these are so yeah. Hopefully it picks up more, and they're actually getting a lot of these places are getting irrigation and infrastructure to sort of boost them.
A lot of the South African agricultural companies, like let's take for instance fresh produce, apples, citrus, pears, grapes, these things, because it needs to be exported to Europe and all over the world, it's got to sit on a ship for many weeks.
Yeah.
Is there opportunity to sell our products up in Africa and for the growers down in South Africa to make good money from it? Do you think there is? Because I know there's South Africa is exporting quite a bit of apples up into Africa, but I'm just thinking, I don't know. I've never been to the shops in a mall in Zambia, for instance. And I also don't know if you've looked closely at what is available there.
No, I have, because you always used to look, because I eat, but the fruits that I can remember, I think the problem is the cold storage. Wouldn't it be like sort of, I don't know if they have those facilities, and our trucks used to stand, I don't know if it's still the case, but it looked like it when I even came through Groblersbrug now in going into Botswana. The trucks are standing queues, so if you transport stuff up there, they're going to stand at the border for 4 or 5 days. They get to places even like ShopRite or whatever. I don't know if the electricity is whatever, if there's enough power for cold storage, and I think that's probably one of the biggest opportunities in Africa is to get the cold storage sorted out, because that's exactly when you go to the shops, stuff is been lying there for 4 days and it's off. When you want to do some shopping. I'm not talking about places like ShopRite in Lusaka, for instance, today. I mean, that is shopping like you do in South Africa. But in the remote areas, there are still these sort of problems. But there's these opportunities. So yes, I think there's too much opportunities for South African farmers to export their stuff to remote regions, especially in Zimbabwe or Zambia or wherever.
And then do the people on the ground, again, coming back to the poor question, do they have the money to buy the produce?
Yeah, that's a very good question, which I do think. I mean, yes, I do think they would be able to. I do think there's the economy going. They're not going to buy stuff at Woolworths, but you go to any ShopRite or Checkers or whatever in some of these. There's a big ShopRite in, for instance, Mongu in Western Zambia. I think it was a ShopRite. And I was surprised by not only that it looks similar to what we used to, but that the local people are actually buying like a lot. They're buying there. They go to, and there was a market next to it, a traditional market, and people seem to me like going to rather to the ShopRite to go and buy stuff. So yeah, I think they will buy.
Very interesting. Very
Interesting.
But this is speculation. This is not. I mean, someone who wants to go in there needs to go and research it and make sure that the market is there. You know.
Yes. Okay. So I'm on your website and I looked under it says sponsorship. Why Africa's annual 45-day African road trip takes place in July and August. We will visit 30 project sites, and this year we plan to visit Limpopo province of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania, and Kenya. You were saying that you recently back from this trip. Tell us more.
Yeah. Look, listen, that trip changed, but I must change on the website. We actually went to Angola.
Okay. Just Angola?
I did Namibia,
okay.
And then went Western Zambia into Angola. We did the Moxico province and Luna Sul in Angola, and then came out through Zambia again, through the Copper Belt, and then through Malawi. Did a lot of the southern parts of Malawi and the central parts, Lusaka, and then through Botswana to South Africa. So, yeah, we had a few. We would have gone to Zimbabwe. The elections happened there, so I was advised not to go through Zimbabwe. I'm never scared to go through Zimbabwe, but it was, we would have been held up at certain places. And then Tanzania and Kenya, we're going to do that. We'll do that. We're going to do it next year. So we're going to include then Zimbabwe in the trip. I've got some invites from certain guys in Mozambique to maybe do a bit of that, and then to go into Tanzania and Kenya. So that's next for next year.
Okay, so what is your expedition when you go there? Tell us about that. How many vehicles? How many people? What is your modus operandi?
Well, okay, so some of my sponsors, my main sponsor, came with me. They obviously give me I use their vehicle. So they did certain legs of the trip with me through Angola, because they also knew the area better. We were then 2 vehicles, and through Western Zambia. And then some parts I do on my own. I'm totally open to anybody who wants to jump in if they can pay their own way. But yeah, it's turning. I'm going to do it now for the 3rd year, and it's becoming bigger. So I want to, maybe eventually there will be 1 or 2 camera video people going along, or another journalist. And I'm open to my sponsors and my partners to do certain legs of the trip with me as well. So if you wanna, if you're a sponsor or a partner, and you wanna hop on, maybe there's something that interests you, you can do 2, 3 days, 4 days with me. And I try and include all those different sectors in where I go to visit. I also interview. When I was in Lilongwe now, for instance, I went to Parliament building to go and interview the minister. So I tried to set up all these interviews. It's a hell of a lot of logistics involved.
Imagine.
And then we do nice stuff in between as well. So if we have 2-3 days, we'll do. And next year we plan to finish a trip at Kilimanjaro, and then hopefully we'll go and do the Kilimanjaro walk.
Wow.
And canoeing on the Zambezi or whatever, So if it's a nice, say for instance, the 4 days on the Zambezi canoeing is a nice team building exercise, or someone who wants to, who I can share with what I've done in Zimbabwe when I just came through there. So yeah, I'm open to people who wants to join me, as long as the project sites and the people that I go and visit are aware that I'm being joined by these people, and they sort of pay their own way. Yeah, that is what I do. So if there's 2 or 3, if you want to bring your own vehicle, sometimes I have space in the vehicle, then people can hop on and join me, and I pick them up at the airport somewhere, and then they carry on. Yeah.
You do realize you're issuing quite a big invitation here. You never know. You might have a whole entourage if you don't watch out. You might need a bus.
That is. I've had these things, and it's turning into a sort of. I used to work in the tourism industry, so yeah, it's something that I can maybe think of in the future of taking guys on tours to these places that nobody really has been to. But anyway, that is part of a plan in the future, or even investors who's interested in these projects, to maybe a few of them wants to hop on and go along.
Must we bring our own fishing rods?
Bring your own fishing rod. I'm not a great fisherman, so yeah, you bring your own fishing rod.
Leon, I wanted to ask, you've been going for about 3 years now, and it's quite a short time, so it might be a bit of an unfair question, but maybe you have an answer on this anyway. Of the things that you've highlighted and people you've introduced to each other, potential investors and places that require investment, are there any success stories where you've put people in contact with each other and things have developed from there? Have you got anything you can talk about that?
Yeah, look, I don't want to talk. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it, but in indirect ways, I have. So there are some case studies or some projects that has got, or even countries that's got exposure, which wouldn't have before. So. Yeah, there are mines, for instance, mining projects, very early stage mining projects who would get attention from into markets where they need to, and they got shareholders. So yeah, there are successes. Not obviously, I want to improve that, and hopefully, in the future, if people get to know I think people are still not too sure about what's happening, but yes, I hope there will be success stories in the future as well.
Well, good luck with that. It's early days, and as I said, 3 years is a short period of time in which to do this. But if you say there are some little sparks and things are happening, then you're making a difference. Sorry, Dewald, I wanted to say.
Look, I always say, you never know who's going to see your work, and you never know who you are going to meet along the line. There might be somebody listening to this that's sitting with a bank full of money that they want to invest somewhere.
Yes,
in your personal opinion,
where
do you think people should look at investing in Africa? Is it mining? Is it tourism? Is it agriculture? Is it from your travels that you've been through the continent?
Yeah, I'm going to go with probably the ones that you mentioned now, and it's weird because that's what a country like Malawi has. They call it ATM there, and it's a weird name, but it's agriculture, tourism, mining that they're focusing on, which will drive all these African economies. The green energy transformation is huge, and Africa has got the critical minerals that's needed for that. So mining is going to be huge. Copper and cobalt, lithium, rare earth elements, for instance, which Africa has got huge deposits of these minerals, especially the DRC, Zambia, Angola. That sort of corridor is huge, and there's big investment from American companies and the EU, especially with the geopolitics. They need to diversify their supply chain, so they are definitely focusing on Africa. There's a lot of American contractors, for instance, in Angola already that I've seen, so those are the areas I think that people will focus on. Energy is another one. Energy in terms of renewable energy, even oil and gas is still, there's big projects still being tendered. Infrastructure. So but those three I think would be the main ones.
Interesting. And from your travels, how big is the influence of China in Africa? Because we hear all these things, is that China's building all the railways and all the roads up in Africa, and they are leaving their not prisoners. They're sending people from there that come and work, and they leave them there. So it's becoming a second China.
Yeah.
What have you seen along those lines?
In recent travels, I've been surprising not a lot. I mean, not a lot of Chinese activity. But look, I mean, they have projects everywhere, but I also do think that they've changed tact a bit. They in Zambia, for instance, they ran into trouble with government if they don't comply with Zambia. Zambia is very, you need to comply with stuff in Zambia, and companies know that. If you don't comply with their regulations, they'll kick you out. And I think there's been a few Chinese companies who did run into trouble in places like these. They've got a big presence in Zimbabwe. I think a lot of projects even the mining projects are being awarded to Chinese contractors. And Namibia, I've seen them in Namibia. I've seen them all over, and I do think they have a big influence. But if they comply, if they do what they're supposed to do, if they don't rip people off, and if they're not corrupt, they should be. I mean, it's open for anybody to compete. If they do it properly and according to the law, they building the infrastructure, there's a lot of roads, bridges that's been built by Chinese, which is helping Africa. They might give up a bit of their minerals in return, but the infrastructure is in place.
Yeah, it's a very important part.
Okay.
But I do think there's hotspots in Africa where I think they involved in Ethiopia big time, in Angola sort of, and they have been in Zambia, but not. I mean, I didn't see as much Chinese activity in Zambia as what I used to.
Okay. So, Leon, looking down the road for Why Africa, what do you want to achieve, and what are your plans, and how tell us about your thoughts for the future of your initiative?
Yeah, I do think, as I say, I do want to. The success rate of introducing these the investors with these projects is important for me, but the road trip, I want to make the road trip quite a big thing, because I think it's unique, and get the word out there to people who, like you said, Nana, who's always asking questions about Africa, and is it safe, and is it, how risky is it? So yeah, hopefully to promote Africa and to make people really interested in Africa through content, really, through doing the videos and my writing and getting people interested in Africa, and then take it from there. You never know. I mean, I wanted to say, when you asked the question, Nana, about the success stories, I've had people from totally different sectors. I've got a Australian company who's been backed by the English government, who's building hospitals across Africa. So I'm seeing on the last road trip, they wanted me to sort of map where there's a need for hospitals, where's a need for medical facilities, what's the health situation like, which is totally not what I was in the beginning intending to do. But yeah, so we're having that sort of conversations where you go into a remote place where people like these are not aware of what's going on. Look, there's development agencies in a lot of these places like the UN or whatever, but the investors are not always there to see, what is needed on the ground. So,
and what do you think can be done to get the investors more, to get eyes more on the ground for them, so that they can see more?
Well, this is my aim, I think, with the road trip, to eventually have the road trip running. And it's difficult sometimes with the technology, and because of limited resources, I don't have a team to go with me, for instance. But that's also my advantage on the other way. I mean, big media companies can't send a whole team into Africa. That will cost too much. So my aim is to, in some sort of way, live stream the road trip, the interviews, and for people to really see what is happening on the ground, and not via third-party reports or
news agencies.
So yeah, hopefully I can get to that stage where I will be able to go into Angola and then live stream events as it happens on the day, and have people sit in on interviews and people listening to it and make up their mind about what they see.
Wow,
interesting. Cool. We've already done some of that.
Yes.
We've done live stream from neighboring countries on particular events, but we'll chat to you about that later.
Yeah, and obviously, the live stream is one thing, and then there are different ways that I think you can make people more aware of what is really happening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Interesting.
It's inspirational what you're doing. It is
very, very, and so needed to change the narrative. Yes, in many ways, what the people in the first world think of Africa, there's a reason for that perception. I mean, it's set, and so often it's self-fulfilling. But a lot of the times, because people just stare blankly into that narrative, they don't see the other stuff. And what you're doing is so important to putting that out there.
What do you always say when the colonizers came into Africa?
Well, there's a joke about the British when they were colonizing the world. They said, if at first the locals don't understand you, you just speak louder until they do.
Yeah, no, true. Yeah.
So I think that was a big issue, the language barrier, and that's why people think it is what it is. So very interesting.
Yeah.
Right, we're coming up onto an hour, which our podcast is normally an hour long, but if there's more stuff, we can extend it. But we've got a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest, and these things are not going out into chronological order, so it could be from anybody. And because most of the people that we speak to is agricultural related, so it might be an agricultural swing to it, but you can answer it any which way.
There's no right or wrong answer, and you also get the opportunity to ask some other stranger a random question at the end of the session.
Okay.
Okay, and okay, let's. This is a question that came up in our previous meeting, but we can word this towards Africa, and we've sort of touched on it. How would you transform the agricultural industry with the current things that's going on, to export our products more to Africa? You've spoken about the cold storage and things like that. Is there anything that you've seen that you think if somebody can just do this, it will be better?
To just drive through border posts and not be not to pay any duties, not for your truck to stand there for like 4 days. I mean, I just think that the African Free Trade Agreement should, it's probably a impossible dream, but for products to just move in and out African countries without 2 days, 3 days, 4 days standing at border posts trying to clear paperwork. The African Free Trade Agreement is very important. So, not for trucks to stand at Beitbridge and waiting to get in there to go and deliver it. They can do it in a day and a half. You can drive from here to Tanzania probably, if everything goes well, if roads are good, if there's no border posts, you can do it in 4 days, with a train even probably quicker. So, yeah, free trade.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's exactly the point. Fresh produce needs to be fresh.
Yes.
And a question that just came to me is, from all the travel, seeing all these amazing things happening in Africa and the way people are, what do you think South Africa can do different? In
terms of agriculture, or?
Well, in general, agriculture is a big part of it, obviously, but in what can South Africa do better? I know that, like the energy crisis, the load shedding, stuff like that.
Yeah. That definitely. I mean, that is stuff that we talk about every day. But I think South Africans should maybe look north. There's a huge market out there, and I think we're missing a beat. We want to export stuff through our ports, which is not always working well. I think they should really. I don't know if it's been done. It has probably be researched. The markets in Africa should be known, and I think there's a opportunity, like we said earlier on, for these African markets to buy these products, and there has to be. There's a food shortage in certain parts in Africa, and we have all these things that we can export. So I don't know. The governments need to talk about it if people can't afford it or whatever. But yes, I think South Africa, for me, I mean, ek gaan dit in Afrikaans sê, ons staar onsself altyd blind teen die probleme in Suid-Afrika, and we always trying to, we're not looking north of the Limpopo. We're looking at China or India. Yes, it's big markets, but there's a bigger market up north.
I think you're very right there, Leon. I think a lot of it comes from a mindset that we had that's come from like the 50s and the 60s, where, to try and remain part of the first world, South Africa and South African, any kind of commerce in South Africa didn't even try and engage with Africa. We just tried to engage with like the first world countries and stuff, and largely just ignored Africa. I mean, people would just talk about, oh, someone's gone into Africa. It was this amorphous unknown, and those that have embraced it, like ShopRite and these people that have actually said, look, let's take Africa seriously and let's move in there. They've done extremely well. But to the average South African, Africa was always this, no, we're not even going to go there, we're not even going to try. And that really needs to change.
We are in Africa, and we still perceive it as a deep, dark continent.
Exactly.
Indeed.
I get it. Yeah. People would always. I've had people who I say, well, if they want to advertise or whatever, and I say no, but why Africa? Look at Africa. Then they would say, no, we in South Africa. We don't look at Africa. So I would say, well, what is South Africa? South Africa is in Africa. We are as part of the continent as any other country. We're not a separate little enclave in Africa. We are part of the continent.
Yes, there isn't a furrow that separates us from the Atlantic to the Indian from the rest of the continent, which I think to a large extent...
There's the Orange River and the Limpopo, like you said.
The mindset from a long time ago is still there. And it is really something that trips us up. And what you're doing, I think, is really chipping away at that. So carry on with that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I think we can call it a wrap. Leon, just hang on the line for a second more. But thank you. We really appreciate your time and what you're doing.
Okay.
Very,
Thank
very
you.
interesting. Thank you so much for taking time to chat to us. And the best of luck with your efforts going forward.
Thank you.